everybody. This is Kane Wagner, owner of Appalachian ADV, Adventure and Dual Sport Motorbiking LLC. Welcome to the Appalachian ADV Community Podcast. Going to try something a little different today. You can see by the name Kane Riding Solo. Today I wanted to talk about my windy path to becoming a motorcycle coach. So basically what I thought would be a good way to go with this one is to just do it by myself. Kind of probably be boring for somebody to just be sitting here with me going through it. So I thought I would just start with a little bit of a verbal resume. So a little bit of my background and history. And then we'll do a little, description of the clinics and go from there. So when you break it down, my history wasn't definitely a straight line. It was a very windy path for me to get to where I'm at now, as most people. But mine had three major pathways, I'd say, when it comes to the motorcycle and becoming a motorcycle coach. There was the sports side of it, there was the military side of it, and then there was my work history in the hospital side of it. So sports-wise, when I was a kid, I started with t-ball, played Little League, Pony League, that kind of a thing. So baseball was kind of like my first introduction to team sports. But when I took it to football, it kind of stepped it up another level. So I played, middle school. I went through high school. I was at a small school, a little town called Lowville. I graduated with like 60 people. When I was a freshman, I think it was, the senior class had like 12 or 13 kids in it. It was the smallest class in the state of Ohio since the one-room schoolhouse thing. So small school. So by the time I was a sophomore, I was able to get some playtime in varsity as a wide receiver. By my junior year, I was, getting a little bit more on the defensive side of it. And when I was a senior, I don't know that I left the field hardly ever. I played, wide receiver. I played defensive back. I was kick returning, punt returning. I was on the kick team, the punt team. I held for the field goals. And me and my best friend, Jeff, we were captains of the high school team our senior year. We also, everything revolved around football for us. So I also ran track. I did, sprinting, 100, 200, did some long jump, that kind of a thing. I always thought I missed the mark on that one. Like I was, I'm definitely quick when I was growing up, but I also was pretty good at distance running. And looking back, I wish I would have been able to do some more distance running in high school. The other thing we did, we had a powerlifting team actually. And we would do powerlifting tournaments at other local high schools in the area. And junior, senior year, we pretty much did those. And we did pretty well for a small school. We had a lot of strong kids, and we did a lot of meets where we were, top three of the school's presidents. So it was a good introduction to, athletics and kind of like the science behind it with running track and then weightlifting to build our football career. So then, I joined Air Force out of high school. I went active duty. I actually was, official job title was Signals Intelligence Analyst. So I was in military intelligence, and I worked at the National Security Agency in Maryland, in between DC, Baltimore, Annapolis, kind of in that area. And while I was there, I was just lucky enough that there was a tackle football league made up of different bases in the area. And I was on Fort Meade, Maryland. So we had a team in this league, and it was 8-man football, kind of like arena style football. And I played for 2 years there. The first year, I just kind of joined the team and started playing. I played a little bit of tight end. I played wide receiver. I played a little defensive back. They put me at nose tackle once or twice because I was freaking quick. And then the second year, the coaches that we had there, they just weren't there anymore. I don't remember the full history, but we kept it going. Me and a buddy. So the one guy, he played defense the year before. He's a little bit older than us, and he decided he didn't want to play anymore, but he would like to coach. So he took over the head coaching spot. I developed the offensive playbook, and our quarterback basically just called the plays from the field, and we would, did pretty well. Like that year, we made it to we call it the Turkey Bowl. So we lost, unfortunately, but we made it that far. And, my time there, we also had this, the league was out of Walter Reed Medical Center, down closer to DC, and they put together an 11-man team. They played a handful of games, 2, 3 games at local junior colleges and stuff like that. And I remember playing one game against a college for the deaf. Like they had this big giant bass drum that they used for their cadence. There was no downset hut. If you can't hear, why would you do that? So they had this big giant bass drum, and they would be able to feel the vibration. So they basically just went on, the same call. Like, we're going to go on 2. So they hit that big bass drum 2 times, and then they would snap the ball and start going. So it was a great experience. It got me the opportunity to kind of start building offensive playbook, and I did help, run some of the practices. So that gave me that kind of a background too. And then I went off active duty, and I decided to go to Europe for a little while. My best friend Jeff, we were captains of the high school team together. We joined the Air Force together. Actually went to basic training together. He ended up in Italy, out of Trieste, Italy, Aviano Air Base, and same thing for him. He got lucked out, and there's an big American football presence in Europe. Germany's, at least at that time, Germany was probably the top American football league in Europe after the U.S. And he played on a team that was out of Trieste, but they actually played in the Austrian American Football League. And I went over there with him, and I ended up coaching their junior team. And over there, it's different. Like the team that Jeff played on, it was tackle, it was regular football. But their junior league, which was basically like 14 to 18-year-olds, I want to say, it was flag for them. And they basically had tournaments. So it's kind of like, soccer's huge over there. So they kind of ran their stuff more like a soccer league. And they did a flag football, and then we would go and travel to these different places in Italy and Austria and just play in these tournaments. We ended up playing a couple games in a day. So I developed the playbook for that. I went and helped, we only practiced maybe once a week, I think, or twice a week. And I would go down there, and there was another guy that played with Jeff. He was Italian. He spoke English. And then all of the kids, basically, out of all of the kids, I don't remember how many we had, but only one of them actually spoke English. The rest were all spoke Italian only, which was interesting for me because I only knew a couple words and phrases. So I had the other coach, get me a big whiteboard and a dry erase marker, and I knew their name, so I can say their name and make a little circle and say, that's you, Fabrizio. And then I would draw the thing, and then I'd go out and set up a bunch of cones, and then I'd say, this is the drawing of it. Now here's what it looks like when you're actually doing it on the field. And we kind of worked it out that way. And then I would have, the other coach and the one kid that did speak English would help me translate things if I was trying to get a specific point across. So it was very interesting experience in a foreign land, teaching them something that I grew up with that, they're interested in. But none of them speak English. So I'm trying to develop, a practice schedule, a playbook, learning these kids' names, learning some words and phrases, and then trying to communicate to them. It was an interesting way to develop some of my early coaching skills, because whether they speak English or not, sometimes it's hard to get a concept across to somebody. They don't get it. You can draw it on a board. You can put the cones out. You can run the thing yourself. But it takes a while sometimes for those things to click, whether you speak English or not. So it's a good practice for me to figure out how to talk to people in a way that they understand. So my ex-wife, now wife at the time, was also stationed in England. I was in England for part of the time I was there, and we lived up north by Harrogate, which is up by Scotland, actually. And the base there actually had a baseball team that was in the British Baseball Federation. So the MLB is the professional league in the U.S. The BBF is that counterpart for England, but nowhere near, as big as MLB. Soccer is king over there. So there was a federation. It was split in North teams and South teams, and we were one of the only All-American teams, because basically the team all of the military personnel from the base basically were on the baseball team. Most of the other baseball teams in this league were actually British people. So we did pretty well when we played, the other teams in the north, but them teams in the south, more around London and the big cities, they were pretty good. So it was it was fun just playing baseball again and getting out, throwing a ball around, and I played mostly outfield. Uh, Once in a while, they put me up at shortstop or something like that, but it was just fun, more than anything. So then we moved back to the States, all that kind of good stuff. And then, continuing on this sports thing, I guess, eventually I found my way down to Columbus, Ohio. And when I was there, my best friend Jeff from high school and also from that time over there in Italy was also living in Columbus. And we started saying we should coach together now that we're in the same town. We should get at this again. So me, him, and another friend of ours who was also went to high school with us, we started putting out some resumes. Those two had coached in Worthington the year before I moved down there. And then we started putting out some resumes like, hey, we want to coach. And Gahanna Jefferson, which is a very large school district down there, as most of them are, brought us on board to coach at one of their three middle schools. Gahanna Middle School South was ours. And down there, they had three middle schools that pumped into one big high school. So it's a lot of kids. So they were able to split their junior high into two different teams, a seventh grade team and an eighth grade team. So what we started doing, we basically down there for 9 years, we would, start with them in seventh grade and then follow them to eighth grade, and then they would go on to high school, and then we would bump back to seventh grade. The first year we did that, I took the head coach position. I developed the offense. I was the offensive coordinator, strength and conditioning coach. I kind of built our practice schedules. And, like I kind of mentioned before, I did play a little bit of everything when I was those couple years in the Air Force. I was third string quarterback when I played in the Air Force just because I developed the offensive playbook. Not that I can throw the ball that well. But as the offensive coordinator, I went ahead and coached the quarterbacks, even though I never really played quarterback, just because I developed the playbook. So I had to kind of, luckily I paid attention all throughout my career in football and was able to kind of develop a practice, individual drills and stuff for those quarterbacks, and put it all together, basically as a whole offense. So that first year I was able to kind of be the head coach, which was really, really fun. And we did great. We only lost one game. It was kind of, for you, Youngstown State University, Ohio State University, Jim Tressel. So Jim Tressel came from Youngstown before he went to Ohio State and won all those national championships. He won national championships at YSU while I was in middle school and high school. We went to his football camps when we were younger. So I kind of took some of his philosophy as far as, 3 yards is a victory. And we kind of set our offense around our team. So the following years, we kind of split off that head coach. We would take turns. And then eventually another guy that we coached with, he was actually trying to get into that school district and get into teaching. So we had him take the head coaching position because that'll be beefy for his resume. I continued to be the offensive coordinator, strength and conditioning, and basically building the practice schedule. But he was head coach, so he took all the administrative stuff, and I was able to concentrate on calling the plays and that kind of stuff. So basically each couple of years, we'd get a new squad in there. So we did, I think overall, if you look at our overall record, we definitely won more than we lost. We went, undefeated a year. We lost one or two games here and there. We would definitely have a year where we didn't do that great. We were less than 500. But all of it's learning experience, whether it's good stuff or bad stuff. So I think overall we did a decent job while we were there. We felt good about it. Actually, towards the end, by the time we, were there for about 9 years, those first couple kids that we coached, by the time they hit like late high school and started going into college, we actually brought them back to help us as assistant coaches. And, so that was, to me, that meant we were doing something right, that these kids, got something out of what we were teaching them, that they wanted to come out and help us out and then help spread that word to the kids that are coming up behind them, which is pretty awesome. That is kind of like the background of the football. Basically I've talked about being in football before, and that's a bit more of a longer story on that side of it. But there was like other things there, like I mentioned powerlifting. I started developing, once I was in the military playing football and then moving on. After that, I kind of developed, a knack for building and designing lifting routines. And it was, slightly mixture of powerlifting and bodybuilding. When I was at active duty, my roommate was a bodybuilder, so I kind of got into some of his workouts. Not that I was trying to be a bodybuilder, but just learning the type of workouts he was trying to do and learning how the body moves more than anything. So I was able to kind of like start designing my own workout routines. And then on top of that, I was having friends that I either, played with in the military or just, friends that I was hung around with that knew I was working out would come out and I would basically be a personal trainer for them. And I would get them into the workout and we would, go back and forth and I would try to figure out what it is they were trying to do, whether it was, adding strength or bulk or conditioning or better balance. Like I basically, started building workouts, for my friends, which was super fun. But also, you got into mountain biking. You did that a bunch, mostly around Ohio, a bunch of good different mountain biking trails, especially down there in Columbus, that I would hit all the time. But snowboarding became a thing after I stopped playing football, and I did that for a long time. We spent a lot of time out west, so I went to Colorado a bunch of times. I had a cousin live there, so we'd go out there a whole bunch. Been to Utah, went to Washington State, up at British Columbia, and then also out east here, North Carolina, West Virginia, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, New York, and Ohio, of course. So I was able to do some traveling with that snowboarding thing, which was tons of fun. And we would spend most of our time kind of all mountain. I was never really into the parks that much, but we would go out into the trees, drop rock ledges, go up to the bowls and drop into the bowls, like that kind of stuff more than anything. Super fun, nice and challenging. And then eventually, right about the time I started coaching in Gahanna when I lived in Columbus, I decided I wanted to try out doing a couple triathlons. My buddy Jeff was doing them. So I tried the couple years in a row, I did the Little Miami Triathlon, which is down by Cincinnati. And that one's a bit different. You think triathlon, you think swimming and biking and running. Instead of swimming at Little Miami, they would actually have you either canoe or kayak down the Little Miami River. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So you go, kayak down the river and then run back up the river and up to the top of the hill and then go out on this big long bike ride. And the first year I did it, you could do it as a team or individual. And me and my buddy Tony, who I went to high school with, played football with, he was living, I think he was still living down in Columbus, and we did it together. So we did the canoe, tandem canoe, and that part was kind of disastrous for us. We didn't practice it at all together. Like I'd been in canoes and kayaks, he'd been in them, but we never really went out and practiced it together. And we struggled a lot on the canoe. Eventually we figured it out. We kind of switched positions and that kind of helped us actually make it work better. It was a ton of fun though. We had a great time with it. And then next year, my buddy Ron, who I coached, so I coached football with him in Gahanna. He decided he wanted to try it with me too. He was, Army guy. And so we decided to do it individually. So we did the kayak, run and bike, and it was a blast. Had a great time. Training for it was, it took a lot of time and dedication. Did a lot of running and workouts and all kind of stuff just to get ready for that. So it was a good experience. Glad I had done it. I did a couple 5Ks and that kind of thing around that same time too, but broke my foot eventually and I kind of stopped running as much. So that's kind of like the sport side that leads me up to the motorcycle thing. As far as like the military side, so like I kind of mentioned active duty, worked in the NSA, and then when we came back from Europe into the States, I went ahead and switched into Air Force Reserve, and I found the medical laboratory sciences. So I was able to get into that through the Air Force. Nice long tech school. I was actually down in Texas for about a year and a half. Really Great school. My daughter actually spent her first birthday down there. Great time though. Played a little baseball with a lot of my instructors actually since I was kind of coming through my second tech school, and I also played some flag football with a bunch of my instructors too. So it was super fun time. Right out of tech school, able to get a national certification to work in a hospital laboratory. Finished my associate's degree with the Community College of the Air Force, and eventually I finished my bachelor's degree in clinical laboratory science through the University of Cincinnati. I was when I did that part, I was actually working as an MLT in a prison lab in Columbus. So the state prison system has at that time at least had a hospital for the inmates, and it could be anything from the blue collar to white collar. It could be minimal security to supermax, because we can hold at pretty much any inmate there. So I had to learn all kind of crazy things that you wouldn't think about, like a self-defense, inmate relations, like how they try to manipulate people, like it just all kind of really interesting information to learn about when you're in a prison system. Our janitors are basically the inmates. So we had whenever these guys would come in and clean the lab, we'd have to actually watch them. So it was very interesting and unique experience. We had to, I mean, I'm a lab guy, but they had still taught us how to do a cell extraction, and that is some inmate is behaving badly, and they have to send the corrections officers in like a freaking SWAT team to extract this inmate from a cell to take them wherever they're going to take them. And they actually taught all of us that. Like I'm in this class with nurses and doctors and lab people and pharmacy, and they're teaching us how to do cell extractions, which was freaking insane. And they also showed us how to do shakedowns. And we had to do like a 6-week school before we went to our job. And there was a reception center at this school. So they actually sent us into the reception center into an open bay dorm where they're housing inmates temporarily. And they basically made our whole class do a shakedown in this place. Insane. Like we found stuff, obviously, and you feel bad like you're busting these guys and they don't have much, but they're in there for a reason. But it was just like a crazy, crazy experience. Yeah, I'm glad I did it, but I was also glad when I left. So I worked there for like 5 years, and that's when I finished my bachelor's degree. And when I was there, since I was kind of certified in that bachelor degree level, even though I didn't have the degree yet, they actually were able to put me into like a supervisory role. So I took over the hematology section. Hematology is basically the study of blood cells. So I was basically in charge of that. So we would run blood through a machine. It would give us numbers, tell us stuff was going wrong or right. And we would have to take, slides of blood and look at them under a microscope. So that kind of stuff. It's also a super interesting line of work. But so I did that. I ended up eventually working at Ohio State University Medical Center. I climbed the ladder there a little further. I was a shift supervisor. I was on day shift. Worked hand in hand with a manager and our lab director. Sat in every interview. Helped whenever we had to fire somebody. Wrote procedures and policies. Was in charge of students when they came in. We had lab students, both the associate level degree and the bachelor level degree, rotate through the hospital, and we'd have to have a training plan for them. So I had to do all that kind of stuff. And I was one of the main trainers for the shift, or actually for the whole lab. They would always come through day shift on training before they went to their own shift. So also another good experience with me trying to learn emotional intelligence, which is knowing how you react in situations and then being able to start learning how other people react in situations. Very basic definition there, but it's basically like trying to read people and gauge how to interact with them to make the interactions go better. So I had to kind of learn how to teach people to do things that were technical. We're working on $100,000 plus machines and having to do maintenance and calibrations and QC, so having all this very technical things to teach these people, and they're coming in with different backgrounds, different skill levels, especially there in Columbus. It's a huge influx of foreigners. You got people from all over the world, coming to OSU to learn or to live, so it was a interesting experience for sure. So then from OSU, I grew up in the Youngstown, Ohio area. So I was starting to look like maybe wanting to climb the ladder a little further, and I found a laboratory manager position here in Youngstown, where I'm from. So my wife and my son and I moved back up this way, and I became a manager. I did that for 5 years. It was a very large system. OSU was, a very big system in itself, but the system I came into was one of the biggest religious nonprofit hospital systems on the East Coast for sure, if not in the entire country. Hospitals all along the Eastern Seaboard, at the time I was there at least, starting to spread into the Midwest a bit. So that, that had its own challenges too, especially being middle management. You got people above you and below you, and generally speaking, nobody's ever super happy with you, no matter how good or bad you're doing. So it was definitely like a good learning experience, and it was a rough time for me for some of that, but that is what kind of pushed me and led me to jump into the motorcycle thing a little bit more. But before I go into that, I wanted to go back and talk a little bit more, that third pillar that I kind of mentioned at the beginning, the military side of what I did. So from Europe, I went into the reserve and into the lab, and I was stationed here at Youngstown Reserve Station initially for a short time, and then eventually I went transferred to the Air National Guard out of Mansfield, and I spent almost 10 years there, and I just had a blast. I just loved it there. The people that I was there with, it's much more like active duty is different than the reserve, is different than the National Guard. When I was in the Air National Guard, I felt more like a family, more like I was back in high school again in a way, like where you build these people stay there as long as they want. Like in the active duty, you're kind of told, oh, now you got to go somewhere else. When you're in the guard, in the reserve too, I guess for a point, you're kind of there for a while. So I stayed there for a long time. I was there with this most of the time with the same people. You become really close with these people because you're spending, 1 week in a month with them, plus you're doing annual tours 2 weeks at a time. And on a couple years, we did, more than one annual tour in the year. And we're all, a lot of, there are people from all over the place coming to these bases, but a lot of them are from Ohio. So my buddy Shane and Kevin that were also in the lab with me, like Kevin lived in Columbus, Shane lived in Worcester, and we would spend a lot of time outside of those times in the guard hanging out and doing stuff. So really great relationships. And the other thing about that is you're learning, especially in the Air Force, which is, I can't really speak on the other branches on this fact, but I'm pretty sure we're all about the same. There's a lot of leadership training in all branches, and depending on the job career field you're in, that leadership training is going to be different. So I was in the medical field, so it's not built around a combat zone, so it's different. But it's still everybody, no matter on the Air Force side at least, you're all going to go to like an airman leadership school, which is I had to do that. You're all going to go to a non-commissioned officer training academy, and all of those things, those kind of schools is teaching you how to be a good airman, how to be a good leader, and how to be a good follower, because leadership and followership kind of go together. So that, we had a lot of that kind of training. And then, since I had finished my bachelor's degree, I decided once a lot of my really close friends started retiring from the Guard or would find other opportunities, to help them further their career, they would sometimes move along to another place. I decided maybe I wanted to do that too. So I was in lab leadership on the civilian side as a supervisor, and I was still on the intention to become a manager. So becoming an officer made sense to me. I had the degree, and I found a lab officer position at Wright-Patterson on their reserve base side. So I took that jump, and I went from being a senior enlisted master sergeant, which is E7, to a butter bar, and having to go back to another basic training. So I went to what's called COT, Commissioned Officer Training, down in Alabama. And, like Air Force, they break those types of things up, especially for the officers. So the very, very specific commissioned officer training that I was in was other medical people, lawyers, we had chaplains. So like that kind of professional was kind of all shoved in the same basic training place together. And, I was coming in as a second lieutenant, so very bottom of that officer ranking structure. And we had pretty much every rank up to full bird colonel. Like some of these very specific specialized positions, depending on that skill level you have from the civilian side, you can actually get bumped up grades on the military side because of that experience you have on the civilian side. And enlisted has that same thing in a way. But, so we had full bird colonels, in this commissioned officer training with us that had zero military experience. And what would happen, generally speaking, some of those full birds, since they're coming in with that such a high rank, they put them in the higher echelons of the commissioned officer training structure. They basically build like we're all in these specific flights, a small group of flights, and then a couple flights into a group into a squadron into a wing. So they kind of built like that mini structure. A lot of our day was spent, learning different leadership and followership skills, that kind of a thing, doing physical training, similar to a regular enlisted basic training, but the yelling part was only about a week or less. And we were there for about 6 or 7 weeks, I think it was. And since I came in there with, at the time, I think I had 14 or 15 years of experience in the military, they actually made me the flight officer in charge of our flight. So there's me and, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 of us all in this flight together. So that's basically the flight was our class. So we had an instructor in our class. The instructor was kind of in charge of us. But I was the middleman basically between that instructor and the flight, which was a good experience. I was scared about it a little apprehension, on that one, just because I know from enlisted side, you don't want to volunteer for anything. But I was kind of voted in by the peers just because I had the experience. And I had a good time with it. Like the people were great. We had there's always hiccups and speed bumps, but I think probably what helped is it was our instructor's first class too. His name was Captain Hammer, I think it was. And at the end of it, we bought him a Thor hammer as a gift, which was freaking hilarious. But yeah, it was a super good experience doing that. It worked out pretty well. Had a good time, learned a lot, and then throughout that whole time of 20 years of service, there's all kinds of trainings, especially when you're in the Guard and Reserve side. That's mostly what you're doing. When I was in the Guard, we spent a lot of time preparing people to be deployed to combat zones, doing physicals, that kind of stuff. And then we would go on annual tours. I was lucky enough to be in a good base we had good leadership to try to get us a lot of really good humanitarian missions. So we went and helped Indian Health Services out west in Southern and Northern California, a couple different trips there, working on Indian reservations, providing free health care, going into the schools and helping, do physicals for the kids, eye exams, all that kind of stuff. And we did, lucky enough, went to Hawaii and did the same thing. And people are going to hear me say Hawaii and they're going to say, oh, poor guy. And yeah, it was beautiful and it was an amazing trip, especially to do it on the government's dime. But we went there and we worked our asses off too during the day. And we went, at the time, a lot of locals, people that are actually Hawaiian, have a hard time there because, it's different now. That was a while ago, maybe. But they used to have these little beach communities where people would live in tents on the beach because they couldn't afford rent and food and everything else that you need. So people that lived on the beach would sometimes have cars and have jobs, and their spouse would have jobs, but they couldn't afford the rent, so they would live on these beach communities because it's always beautiful in Hawaii, and it always rains around the same time, so it's very predictable. But we went in there to provide a lot of free healthcare to them. We went into the local schools of the area and provided free physicals. Same deal as when we worked at Indian Health Services. So great experiences doing those things. But a lot of training outside of that. We would do couple annual tours where that's all we did was train and prepare to go to war. Basically, when I was in the Guard, we were in what's called an EMEDS package, which is kind of like MASH. If you ever saw the show or the movie MASH, that is basically to the T my experience at Mansfield. And me and my friend Shane, who were in the lab together, we were Hawkeye and Pierce. We would come in, do all the smoking and joking, tell the funny stories, and everybody would be having a good time. But then when the shit hit the fan, it was serious. Then we would put the other hat on and we would go to work and do the thing. So it's kind of how it went for us there. And you learn a lot of, if you're in a war zone, in the Air Force, what they called it, when I was in, it was called self-aid buddy care. It's, you get hurt, figuring out how to fix yourself, or your buddy gets hurt, helping them get fixed up, at least to get transported to the next place, which to me sounds very familiar to motorcycle self-aid and buddy care. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff. So that kind of wraps those three pathways. Now I'm going to combine them into the motorcycle. When I'm at OSU, and this story obviously jumps around a bunch because I'm telling, the same story three different times, basically, three different ways, because these are the things that I look back and think about. This is the three paths that led me to this. And it led me to working at OSU. My friend Gabe, who initially I was the second shift supervisor for a very short time. He was on second shift. He started sharing me all this information about motorcycles, and specifically BMW GS, long way round, that kind of stuff, adventure bike at the beginning. And it piqued my interest, for more than one reason, obviously. A lot of my history kind of was able to be summed up in that thing. And I always had an interest in motorcycles, just never did it. So he finds me a V-Strom 650, and we go to take a look at it. I don't have a motorcycle endorsement. I don't have a helmet. I don't have anything. So he rides his bike to my house. We drive down, look at this bike. He just doesn't realize it until we get there, but he actually kind of knows the guy. Their daughters were friends in school or something like that. So they kind of knew each other through that. Gabe looks at it, kicks the tires for me, takes it on a test ride, and I end up handing this guy whatever, well, $4,500 or whatever for the bike. And then I'm following Gabe back to my house. He's riding my new bike, and I'm driving behind him. He comes back, we get in the garage, we're super excited about the potential thing that we just put together here. He's got a riding buddy, and I got somebody that can help me figure this whole thing out. And that's around 2011, 2012-ish, I'd say. Yeah, that was 2012, because my wife comes home. She was working second shift down there. She comes home from work, and she sees the bike in the garage. She waddles into the house, several months pregnant with our son, and gives me that look. And if you're married, you know the look when you do something crazy, stupid, or both, and your wife just kind of looks at you. That's the look right there. So luckily, if you're from Ohio area, or you've heard of Iron Pony Motorsports, it's one of the largest freaking motorcycle stores in the state for sure. I live a couple blocks from it. So Gabe and I go there. We grabs me helmet, riding gear, all that kind of good stuff. I sign up for the Motorcycle Safety Foundation Bicycle Rider course, jump on one of their TW200s, do a couple days with them, get my endorsement after that. And then me and Gabe just start going out and riding. And we took a bunch of nice, big, long trips, multi-day, had a lot of fun. I'm not going to tell the story, but on my website, there's a three-part story. The first two are Appalachian adventures, and then the third one is actually talking about our MABDR ride. But they all kind of go together. And it talks about an injury he sustained on one of our trips. So if you want to hear more about that, go over there and take a look at that one. So I also moved back, that's about the time I moved back here to Youngstown. And around that same time, I decided to go to Tour Tech Rally. It was in the middle of Pennsylvania. And Pine Barrens was putting on the training there, so I signed up for their Dirt 101 on one day and Dirt 201 on the other day, and did some training with them. And then just started, riding around here and scouting around a bunch more. So, the seeds of Appalachian ADV kind of started early on with Gabe doing these trips and thinking maybe I could do something with that. And then really started hitting me harder when I came to Youngstown. For more than one reason, that whole not having a great time as a manager, and just seeing all the great stuff around here that I never paid attention to before, because I wasn't riding motorcycles and stuff back then. But finding that whole Fool's Ride area, going over to Allegheny in western Pennsylvania, and then going over to PA Wilds, I really started kind of deciding I need to figure this thing out and figure out how to make this work. So I started doing all that scouting over there, and just each year I started putting together what I called the skid school. And it was just for myself. Like I watched a couple specific people on YouTube, and they had a couple like training type videos, like little clips, like, hey, this is how to do a power slide, this is how to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I would watch those. And then I started putting them in an order that made sense to me, going back to my building a practice schedule and building an offense as an offensive coordinator. Like started kind of putting that brain into the motorcycle and trying to build myself like a training because I wanted to get better after going especially to the MSF course and the Pine Barrens courses and getting me the semi-structure, there, and then being able to wrap my own stuff into it. And that, each time I go out and ride, especially, if people have come to my clinic, they would have heard me say this, purposeful riding. So anytime I go out on a ride, even if it's a joyride, I'm trying to think of ways to press my skills a little bit, where I'll go through a turn and try to hit it at a specific angle. And then maybe another turn coming up, I'll try at a different angle and a different bike lean. I'll try to hit a little more gas or a little less gas, try to slam the brakes at a thing, try to work on balance moves. Like when I come to a stop sign, like I was really being purposeful with my riding and trying to like apply that scientific method to it. That's kind of what led me to start designing routes and all that thing, that very scientific view, trying to put all that together kind of a thing. So that eventually, I'd start doing events first before I did the clinic. So a version of the Fool's Ride happened. COVID hit, so I couldn't do it kind of in April that year. That's the year I was trying to start this thing. So I pushed that back. I still did a PA Wilds tour that summer. The following year, the first official Fool's Ride by title and date. Did that PA Wilds tour again. I added my Allegheny tour. I had an Allegheny rally, but it was more of a, hey, I'm just going to go to this place if anybody wants to join me. I kind of started it that way. So it started building momentum for Appalachian ADV and getting the word out and having an awesome time meeting people and, getting to know more and more riders and kind of see people getting into it and people that have been doing it for a while and, gauging people's interests and how they want, things to happen for their own motorcycle journey. And then eventually I connected up with Street Track and Trail. The owner, Dick Lepley, found me through my connection with the BDR, Backcountry Discovery Routes. They are a dealership up in Conneaut Lake, and Harley's one of the brands they sell, and the Pan American came out that year. And one of their longtime customers bought it and said, hey, you should check out this BDR thing. And Dick contacted Derek at the BDR, my buddy. And Derek's like, oh, yeah, we got an ambassador right down the road from you that might be able to come up and help you out. And by the way, he does this Appalachian ADV thing, and maybe you'll be interested in it. And then I talked to Derek a couple of days later. He's like, oh, man, I talked to this guy, Dick. He's super, super excited to know you're down the road, and here's his information. Get a hold of him. So we planned our first documentary together, BDR Doc, put that together, and just had fun with it. We kind of turned it into, hey, let's do a little bit of a ride first and maybe then do the movie kind of a thing. And we built it into what it is now. It's a Great Adventure Begin Here rally, free event based out of Street Track and Trail. I put together some loops, take people out riding. We do mini clinics, that kind of stuff. It's super fun event. But the clinics kind of grew out of that relationship because I knew I wanted to do them. And, technically speaking, I'm an online business that does events at different locations. Once I had this collaboration with Street Track and Trail, I just kind of asked him, hey, man, what do you think about me doing this up there? I think it'd be really cool, like mutually beneficial. You got all this great space up there, and a busy US Route 6 goes right by the dealership. People will see me out there doing this stuff, and they're going to want to stop in to your dealership. And then all the people that are coming to the clinics, maybe they'll, need to grab a helmet or need to replace a part or buy a bike from you even at, best case scenario. And then maybe somebody that buys a bike from you sees me out here one day and they say, hey, maybe I'll come and see what he's doing. And that's definitely happened both ways over the last couple of years that we've done this. My first clinic that we did there was October of 2022. And just like everything else, I've treated this whole thing, Appalachian ADV, as a whole, as an experiment. So I'm okay with trying something and maybe it doesn't work. That's definitely happened along the way. But luckily, these clinics have worked pretty well. mean, I've had a blast. We've had great feedback. People have come back to more than one, which is great. So, but what I've tried to do as I've built like an official clinic, as opposed to my little skid school thing I was doing for myself, was actually build my own structure to it and knowing like the things that I want to cover, which is fairly broad, but make it so that it's a smaller group of people, which makes me able to semi-customize these things a bit. And then know that I want to start with this thing because it's a thing you need throughout the whole time. So we'll start with that thing. Then I'm going to concentrate on another thing. Then I'm going to come back to the third drill and say, hey, remember that thing we did the first time? This is where you might need to use that a bit. So trying to like weave a training schedule that makes sense, that gives people a break so that they're not getting beaten up the whole time or like really having to concentrate on pulling that clutch a ton. So it kind of gives them breaks, throughout the day too. So that's kind of how I built it, just basically using my history as a coach and building practices and, building an offense, into motorcycles. And even the leadership things that I learned, from the military and, working at different levels in the civilian lab too. Emotional intelligence, leadership and followership, just paying attention to little things. Like emotional intelligence is huge for me because trying to learn how I react to certain people helps me get my message across to them better because I know this person is frustrated. I can't attack them this way. I have to kind of come around from the side. Or this person is harder on themselves than anything I say now is going to make it worse. So let me come in with something good. And generally speaking, as a leader in a military of the lab, I always kind of use that method where it's the bookends. We're going to start with something good. I'm going to tell you where you're screwing up, and then I'm going to tell you something good at the end, or maybe how we're going to turn that bad thing into a good thing. So that's kind of all of those skills I've had to try to use in some form or fashion. Kind of anything that I've led, any group ride that I've led, but definitely in these clinics. So it's been an interesting journey with that too. So that, these are kind of, I can custom build a lesson plan and a rubric, which allows me in a semi-controlled way to push people's limits and really just help them generally build confidence in the bike. Hey, this bike can do this thing. But then also that helps them build confidence in themselves to say, if the bike can do it, then you should be able to do it too, as long as you figure out how to work that clutch, work the throttle, work the brakes, work your balance, and you're not always going to get it. And, a big thing that I've always said to everybody along the way is you just have to plan that you're going to fall, and you have to be ready for that and just know that it's going to happen. You're taking a bike on loose surfaces, dirt, gravel, at these clinics we're in the grass a bunch. So you're going to fall. And we try to do a lot of it in the grass because it's a softer landing than a gravel pit or a paved road. So just take that into account, that's part of it. Part of it, learning these adventure dual sport bikes, is seeing the ground a lot closer than you want to. And just knowing that you're going to have to do that. And everybody falls. Like even when I'm doing these drills, like showcasing them to people, like, hey, this is what I'm talking about. I will fall on occasion because it just happens. Your traction gets lost and you're not ready for it, or you dab when you don't really want to. Those things just happen. So being prepared for that is definitely a big part of it. But the big thing for me, I do offer private clinics, but these clinics are semi-private because it's you and 5 people, or it's me and 5 people. Even if we're all doing the same drill, I can say, hey, you seem to be doing pretty good at this. So how about I throw this into the drill that's a little harder? And then the person right behind you that's going to do it, they're struggling with it. So I'm going to break it down a little bit further and try to have them work on a piece of it instead of the whole thing, or tell them to do it in a different way that's maybe not as hard. And then I can give feedback based off of, hey, did you see what that person in front of you just did? They did that thing perfect. They did it awesome. So try to mimic what they did. Or, hey, you see when they dabbed and where they lost control of the thing? Learn from that. So it's definitely having that small group and having me the ability to kind of look at everybody and watch people easier. It helps everybody. It benefits everybody at the clinic. So I guess the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about was I did just this past, the end of this last year, I went ahead and got a certification for motorcycle coaching through the U.S. Motorcycle Coaching Association. And it's a great organization. They basically certify people that have been coaching. So that USMCA certification, it's an excellent thing to have. The process to get through it is a national background check. You have to go through abuse prevention training, CPR first aid, some concussion protocol training, heat illness certifications, cardiac arrest training. And it took me, I want to say, like actual hours, probably about 20-ish hours to complete everything, including putting together a list of references of people that have been to the clinic. And I'm going to take a moment to say how much I appreciate the people that I did reach out to that had come to past clinics, that took the time to answer the phone and talk to my friends at USMCA or answer the email. So I appreciate you guys doing that for me. But part of the reason why I went with the USMCA as opposed to like the MSF or somebody like that is the USMCA, it's not in the function of training a trainer. It's basically certifying that somebody is qualified to train, that I've been doing this for a certain amount of time, that I have references, that I had to basically share like my class structure, my rubrics. I had to answer a bunch of different questions on my teaching strategies and that kind of thing. So they're not coming in and telling me that I have to train their course. They're saying you're doing your thing, and from what we can see, it's going well enough that we're going to certify you. That's kind of how I took it. That's not exactly how they would word it, I'm sure, but that's kind of like my synopsis of it. Where the MSF, which nothing wrong with the MSF, I think they're a great organization. And truthfully, like if somebody tries to come to one of my beginner intermediate clinics and they have zero experience on a motorcycle or are not comfortable with a clutch, I will generally point them to the MSF and say, you should take these beginner or the basic rider course first and get comfortable with the bike and the clutch before you come to my class. So I will definitely forward it to MSF. But if I'm going to be an MSF instructor, they're going to expect me to teach their course. And it's pretty regimented and rigorous. And you spent this amount of time on this thing, and then you go to this and this and this, and then you certify or not certify a person. Where I call my thing a riding clinic for a reason, because technically speaking, I'm not certifying you that you are now an intermediate level or an upper intermediate level rider. I'm giving you a bunch of tools and some experience and some feedback so that when you take it home and practice at home or go out and do that purposeful riding, that you can think about the things we did and then do them. And then, come back to another course you want, or go and take the MSF, or go to somebody like BJ from DC Dirt Camp, go and take her course, and then come back to mine, please, or to an event, But like, that's the point, is nobody's going to do it right or wrong, or nobody's going to be 100% or 100% wrong. I'm going to probably do a lot of the same drills that MSF would do or that BJ would do at DC Dirt Camp, but I might explain it in a different way, or we might work on it a bit longer, a bit shorter. I might try to break it down differently than they do, or vice versa. So between hitting multiple training places, you get a more well-rounded structure to build upon your skills. And that's kind of what I've been trying to build with these clinics, is especially with these beginner and intermediate ones, is a foundation and a place to kind of give you some confidence. I mean, that's really the biggest part of this. So like basically the history is that I've basically been doing these level 1, beginner, intermediate level. Not to say that some of the stuff that I take these guys through, especially on that second session in the real world, it can be an expert-ish or upper intermediate level thing that I'm asking you to do, but it's a controlled environment. We're all stopping, and we're going to help each other get through it, and it's just that one thing. Where when I build, like for instance, if I build like a dual sport, like expert route for the Fool's Ride, that one little thing that I took you through in the clinic, it's going to be a dozen of those things, if not more, in a day. Where at the clinic, it's 1 or 2 of them in that day. So that's the same thing with the Fool's Ride on the intermediate level ride. Instead of doing it a dozen times, maybe it's going to be 3 or 4 times, and probably all of them are going to be optional, kind of a thing. So these intermediate, upper, or beginner intermediate clinics, we're going to push your limits a bit, but we're going to give you a structure in which to fail and learn from it and give you some confidence that you can do it the second time you try it. That's kind of where we're at with that. So we do a 1-day and a 2-day clinic, but we basically break them down the same, no matter if it's a 1 or 2. So we have a session 1 and a session 2. So basically, if it's a 1-day, session 1 is kind of like before lunch, session 2 is after lunch. for doing a 1-day, 2-day. The 2-day, session 1 is day 1, session 2 is day 2. But they're basically broken down the same. So that session 1 is a bit more of that theory, a bit more of the drills and the repetitions of those drills. Session 2 is going to be, we're going to go out in the real world. Instead of cones, we got, a creek or a ledge or a hill or some trees to go in between. But it's basically like giving you a real world scenario to work the stuff we did in session 1, put that in the real world and give you a shot at it out there. So that's kind of like the basic structure of the clinics, whether it's level 1 or level 2. Really, I'm going to basically do the same thing. And what we do on those, the Saturday, whether it's a 1 or a 2-day, I'm also going to cook you lunch. And I like eating good food, so generally what I do is I bring out some chicken and a grill, and I'm going to grill up some chicken. We're going to have some sides with it, some drinks, and we're going to hang out for a while and just kind of relax, kick the boots off, let the sweat evaporate a little bit, maybe some of that stink come off of us, and we're going to eat a good meal. We're going to relax a little bit. We're going to discuss whatever you guys want to discuss, really. If you want to talk about some of the drills or what we're going to do in the next session, it's kind of like just a time for us to kind of relax and shoot the shit a little bit. So basically, like, my intention for these level 2 intermediate plus is to kind of piggyback on that level 1 clinic. And ideally, we would have you at that level 1 before you do the level 2. But, I've been doing a bunch of events. If you come out and you've ridden with me at the event, or you have done like a Pine Barrens or DC Dirt Camp beginner intermediate level thing, let's have a conversation about it, and then we'll get you signed up for that level 2. But the level 2, it's going to be, my intention is to build more obstacles that are a bit more technical compared to what we did in the level 1, which are small boards, small wood, cones, going around cones and stuff like that. Building bigger structures, a little bit more technical, more cross rut type stuff, more off balance riding, hitting steeper, bigger climbs, that kind of stuff. So we're going to do those kind of where I do the Fools Ride Rally, which is here in Northeast Ohio. A lot more dual sport terrain to work with down there. We'll base it where we base the Fools Ride, out of Jim's place, and we're going to have some stuff there on the property to use for, that session 1. And then I've got a ton of terrain to work with to take people out for the level 2. And depending on the group, I can add some of the more technical, or I can make it a little less technical. And then looking at these private clinics, the privates are intended to be whatever. So the pricing structure for all these is basically the same, whether you're doing level 1 to level 2, same pricing structure. If you're doing a private clinic, whether it's a level 1 style, a level 2 style, some combination of that, it's basically the same pricing for the private. So we can do a one-on-one, or you and a buddy or a wife or spouse or a couple friends, or brother, sister, whatever it is, and we can work a bit on level 1, and we can just kind of go from there. If you're doing great and we want to keep bumping it up, I'll just keep bumping it up and make it more and more intense. If you want to do so, last year I had somebody come out and we did our second session. We did a 1-day. First session was kind of like our normal first session. The second session, we talked about moto camping, and I brought some bags and I brought a bunch of gear that I would normally pack, and we talked about best practices. Not that I have the best practices, but like some things to think about at least, and some of the things that I've learned along the way about moto camping and recommendations. A place like Moto Camp Nerd is a perfect place to send people when they're interested in moto camping. So talking about that kind of stuff, and then actually putting the bags on your bike, and then putting a bit of weight in them, and then doing a lot of those session 1 drills with weight. So we can do all kind of different things with these private clinics. That's kind of my intention with them. If you've looked at my event schedule for 25, it's pretty busy. So for the private ones, at least, I'm more going to be able to schedule those like during the week. So we do 1 or 2 day during the week, a bit easier. I have some limited weekend time here and there. We can pick up, maybe if I'm doing a 1-day clinic on a Saturday at Street Track and Trail, then we can do a 1-day private session with somebody on a Sunday. Or another thing we've done in the past, where I've had a person sign up for the group clinic 1 day on a Saturday, and then that person and me stuck around on Sunday, and we went and did our own little private session thing on the Sunday. So I was able to offer like a combination group clinic, private clinic thing. So, and that was a ton of fun too, because as I've been doing more, it's getting easier for me to work these things out. But it's a little bit of a challenge that's thrown my way. It makes it a little bit different for me, which is exciting. Then I get a chance to like work my brain a little bit and try to make things work a little bit better for that person and have it more interesting for them. So it's been fun. Another thing we can work on with the privates more so is like super basic, common roadside maintenance issue things. I'm not a mechanic in any form or fashion, but there are a lot of things that happen commonly, like a pinch tube, flat tire, that kind of crap. So we can work on that as, doing a roadside tire change or tube change or something like that. Just some, things like that we can throw into those private ones. And even on a group one, I'm not opposed to, hey, I'll buy you a couple shirts from you if you want to show us how to change a tire kind of thing. I've done that in the past too, where somebody came to a group, wanted to do that. And I said, oh, donate money to a cause or, buy a couple of my shirts and we'll call it even kind of a thing. So something minor like that. So basically, I hope if you stuck around for this whole thing, I hope you got something out of it, learn a little bit more about where I'm coming from, the experiences I bring to it, and just, I want people to understand that I think it's worth your time and effort to come out and do these things, and to get training at multiple places, truthfully. But I've been spending a lot of time, about 10 years since I've been back here in Youngstown, and 2019 is when I started building Appalachian ADV. And basically that, for the last 10 years, I've been putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this thing, trying to come up with ways to get people interested in our community, the adventure and dual sport community, and interested in what I'm doing, obviously, and coming out and having a good time. I think particularly when you look at pricing, I've attempted to put my pricing consistent with others doing similar things that I'm doing. But I think over the years, I've consistently been lower than most, especially looking at these clinics. Like this year compared to last year, I did have to increase the pricing a little bit, but I'm still competitive. There's definitely a couple places that'll do it a little bit less, but I think most of them will do it for way more than what I'm charging, especially for our 2 days. But, the goal is to give you something back more than what you put in. And that's my hope, especially since I can semi-customize these things, that you're going to put your time and your effort into coming out with me and your money. But I hope that it's worth it in the end. And I think I've gotten pretty decent feedback so far that it seems like it is that way. And, I'm not a salesman. I've never been. If you've listened to my history here, if you've seen anything else I've done, I don't know how to be a salesman other than to just try to give people what I would want. That's basically it. And really, I've tried to work with and collaborate with other mom and pop level places. I've really been intentional on trying to help build the adventure and dual sport community and support other organizations that I think are doing excellent work, like Backcountry Discovery Routes, the PAOHV group, the newly formed Ohio Off-Highway Motorcycle Association, and the American Motorcycle Association. The long-term goal is that I'm able to do this into the unforeseen future. And as my son gets older and gets more involved, my family's already involved with a lot of our big events. But that's the intention, is to just share my love of this sport and the things you can get out of it. You ride a motorcycle, you are by yourself, but I try to make our events into more of a team sport, try to build relationships from far and wide. We've gotten people from all across the East Coast here to come to these things, and we see people, every once a year or every couple months if we're lucky, and it's like you pick up where you left off. It's pretty awesome. So that's what I'm trying to sell. If you're interested in seeing more, or hearing more, stick with us at this podcast. If you go to AppalachianADV.com, you can sign up for our sporadic newsletter. You can find all of our social media channels there too. You can email me at Kane, Kane, at AppalachianADV.com. And hey, let me know what you guys thought about this one, because I just sat here and talked to myself for a long time, and it's kind of weird. I generally don't do this kind of thing. So let me know what you thought. And if you'd like to see maybe one of these here and there every once in a blue moon. Otherwise, get out there, have fun, take chances, and also remember, experience gained is wisdom earned. Thanks for coming along.